It can be terrifying for a parent to discover that their child has a severe mental illness and the difficulties it will cause them in a life. However, because they're parents, they never believed that this illness would cause their kid to do something to hurt them, right? Melanie Davis did the best that she could with the cards she was dealt, but to her son Zachary, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't just Zachary's crimes that made him famous, but the world-famous interview that put him on the map as one of the evilest killers in history.
It was this wet thumping sound.
Zachary Davis was born in July 1997 to his parents, Melanie and Chris. His brother Josh is a year older than him, and according to him, they always got along super well. However, tragedy struck the family when Chris passed away in 2007 after a painful battle with ALS, sometimes known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Y'all remember the Ice Bucket Challenge? That's the illness it was raising awareness for. ALS is a disease that affects the nerves in your brain and spine, over time slowly causing people to lose control of their muscles. Eventually, Chris wasn't able to talk or feed himself before he sadly passed away. It is a horrible illness and naturally left his sons traumatized when it finally claimed his life. After Chris passed away, there was noticeable changes in Zachary, and not the normal grieving son kind of change. No, whatever was going on in Zachary's head was way more extreme. The family moved to Tennessee for a fresh start, and just a few months later, Melanie took Zachary to a psychiatrist. He told his doctor that he was hearing voices, and while it was obvious Zachary was suffering from a mental illness, they never got to treat it. For some unknown reason, Melanie stopped taking Zachary to his appointments, and he was left untreated, his symptoms slowly growing worse and worse. Because of his issues, Zachary became your typical teenage outcast. One of his former classmates actually took to Reddit to answer questions about him. The info they gave was pretty enlightening. They claimed that Zachary was far from normal. He never smiled and wore the exact same hooded sweatshirt every day, no matter what the weather was. However, no matter how strange he might have been, nobody suspected Zachary of being evil. But what was it that turned Zachary from a typical outcast to someone that people have called a monster? Well, I'll tell you. On August 10th, 2012, Melanie, along with her two sons, went to the movies to watch The Campaign, the most popular comedy of the year. Everything seemed totally normal. They all enjoyed the movie and went home. Neither Melanie nor Josh knew that before the night ended, they were intended to die. In a journal that the detectives would later discover, it turns out Zachary was planning to commit his heinous crimes days before it took place. Melanie went to bed at 9 p.m. and Josh went into his own room soon after. While they did this, Zachary was getting prepared. He packed a backpack and a satchel with spare clothes, a toothbrush, ski mask, notebooks, gloves, and a claw hammer. It was like he was packing to go on the run, which is exactly what he planned to do. But before he did that, he did something that nobody saw coming. As his family slept, Zachary went into the garage and retrieved a sledgehammer. Then, he went into his mom's room and started swinging. According to the coroner, Melanie was at least 8 times before she tragically lost her life. Zachary hid the soaked sledgehammer in the laundry room and moved to the next stage of his plan, getting rid of Josh. He took a bottle of whiskey and poured it all over the games room before setting it alit, closing the door. Later on in his diary, he wrote that he did that so that Josh would have to suffer. Except that isn't what happened. Closing the door was Zachary's big mistake and a miracle for Josh. The door stopped the fire from spreading to the rest of the house, but there was enough smoke to activate the fire alarm. Josh awoke to the smell of smoke, and before he ran out to save himself, he ran to his mom's room to find her face completely disfigured and the whole room covered in her blood. Josh ran to the neighbor's house for help, and they called the cops, who immediately started searching for Zachary. They caught up with him 5 hours later as he was walking along the side of the road. He was pretty difficult to miss since he was covered in blood and all. Now, I don't understand what the cops were expecting when they arrested the teen who just tried to kill his whole family. I don't even think they could predict the madness that is Zachary Davis. Later, a doctor who evaluated Zachary said he was a case unlike any she'd seen before. I've never encountered someone so severely detached from his emotions. Before long, news of the horrific crime became big news, and everyone was eager for any and all details about the remorseless teen killer. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime, but how Zachary was responding to the situation. Sometimes he would smirk, smile, or even laugh when discussing with investigators what he did that night, and things didn't make any more sense once he went to trial. But before that, Zachary made a decision that would make him one of the most famous killers of the 21st century. He agreed to an interview interview with Dr. Phil to discuss the details of his crime before he'd even gone to trial. This allowed the world a glimpse into Zachary's strange mind. Dr. Phil asked Zachary some very blunt questions about his crime, stuff you'd only expect to hear under examination in court.
Did you kill your mother?
Yeah.
They talked at length about the details of that gruesome night, Zachary's motives, and what was going through his head that day. You can watch most of the episode on Dr. Phil's YouTube channel, and I really recommend that you do. I've never seen anyone quite like Zachary before. Honestly, you guys, it's hard to remember a lot of the interview because, well, what I remember most clearly is him. His eyes are totally blank, and the way he slowly nods his head, his creepy voice, it's like he's the villain in a horror movie. The worst part of all, by far, is when he laughs.
What did it sound like?
There was this wet thumping sound.
How disturbing is that? This interview put Zachary's crime on the map, and he was given the nickname the Sledgehammer Killer. Clips of the interview went viral online, garnering over 13 million views on YouTube alone. This really didn't do Zachary any favors. If anything, it gave him just more negative press. And did he care what the public thought of him? It's hard to say. Seems like he doesn't really care about anything. As you can imagine, the response to the interview wasn't positive. Most people were really disturbed by Zachary, the crime, and just everything to do with it. Some people even theorized that he was possessed by a demon, and that's why he was speaking with a creepy voice. I think it's pretty normal to try and find excuses for why people do these things, you know? Especially when it's someone Zachary's age. You can blame it on mental illness, possession, but ultimately, it doesn't take away from the fact that he ended someone's life. The life of his own mom. Still, despite his unnerving and revealing TV appearance, the case went forward to trial as planned. There's a couple of things to keep in mind here. One, Zachary confessed to his crimes. The police knew exactly what he did and had more than enough evidence to convict. Second, this is clearly someone who is not mentally well, and there has been a lot of debate whether he should have been declared fit to stand trial. Even with that in mind, the state decided to try him as an adult for the severity of the murder. It became clear pretty quickly that despite his confession, Zachary was trying everything in the book to either get him off the hook or reduce his sentence. He claimed that part of the reasoning for his crime was the fact that he'd been violated by his brother Josh. This was a shocking statement, especially since to the knowledge of everyone around them, they were just a happy family. Josh took to the stand to appear as a witness and was confronted with this claim, which he strongly denied. There was nothing that supported Zachary's claims except his own word. As we would later learn, this was not a reliable source of information, especially when it came to his brother. He told the court that he committed the crime because the voices in his head told him to.
You tell the judge, do you recognize that voice?
It's the voice of my father.
That fact alone almost brings this case full circle. If his dad hadn't passed away, would he have started hearing his dad's voice in his head? If he'd kept seeing the doctor, would it have gone away? Sadly, we'll never know. By all accounts, Melanie was a great mom who loved both her sons very much. She was ambitious, active, and known to be an all-around good person. This is somewhat supported by some of Zachary's diary entries after her passing. My only true regret was that I didn't give her a faster death. I didn't want her to suffer. And then, a couple of days into the trial, something totally weird happened. Zachary changed his story. This seemed to come as a surprise to literally everyone, including his own attorneys. During the trial, in front of the jury, Zachary suddenly declared that he wasn't responsible for his mom's death at all. He claimed he was covering for Josh, the true culprit. According to reports of the trial, this left everyone in the room totally dumbfounded. Even his own attorney confronted Zachary about this change in the story, reminding him that he'd confessed to the murder many times. His plea of innocence was discarded and honestly was just another prime example of how detached from this situation he was. His attorney's main defense was Zachary is clearly mentally ill, so much so that he doesn't know right from wrong and was totally controlled by his psychosis. Unsurprisingly, after a 4-day trial, Zachary was found guilty of first-degree homicide. He was sentenced to 71 years behind bars, meaning he'll be 88 years old when he's eligible for parole. He'll probably pass away in prison, and to be honest, that may be the best thing for everyone in this situation. What are your thoughts on this case? Will we ever understand why Zachary did what he did? Should he ever be allowed out on the streets again? I can't wait to see what you guys think down in the comments.